Hello everyone and welcome to our very special event today with Vitality. My name is Jamie and I am part of the coaching team. And firstly, thank you so much for joining us today. I must say, fear not, my role today is purely to introduce our guests. This is not the main event, so I will waste no time in getting to that. But as you may already be aware, during March, we actually celebrated International Women's Day. And we are really incredibly privileged at Vitality to work with so many inspirational women. And today we are joined by two of our ambassadors who definitely fit within that category. So during this exclusive interview, our guests will be sharing their personal journeys, the importance of resilience, and the things that they have learned along the way from their perceived failures, as well as the specific challenges facing women in the worlds of sport, but also business. And they're also going to be sharing some of their advice about how we as a community can support women and parents in our own networks. So for everyone watching today, just a tiny bit of housekeeping from me before I leave you. I will be jumping back in towards the end of the session to forward your questions on to our guests. So please do navigate to the right-hand side of your screen where you'll find a questions box. I promise I'll keep an eye on those throughout. And if you also look at the handout section in there as well, you'll find our full events program for April, which we really do hope you'll join us for. So this is now my cue to kind of leave, but before I do that, obviously I will introduce our guests. So Dame Jess Ennis-Hill, firstly, who we all know as probably one of Britain's most iconic athletes, the face of London 2012, Olympic and multiple world champion, as well as much more than that. I think just one of the nicest people you'll also ever meet. And we also are super privileged to be joined by Gabby Logan MBE, who is also a former international athlete, but now someone who is probably most well known for being one of the UK's leading sports hosts and broadcasters. And I think it's safe to say that we're in good hands with these two. So for now, all I'll say to you, thank you so much both for joining us. I look forward to chatting to you a little bit later and see you on the other side.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Hi, Jess. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very, very well. It's lovely to see you and always great to chat with you. I think Jamie's given a kind of overview there of the kind of things we'll talk about. I wanted to kick off with talking about the fact that determination and resilience, they're so important in underpinning whatever it is that we do in life. When you want to be successful, they're really important components. But if you go right back to the kind of start, especially in sport, you don't know what those qualities are when you're a kid. You know, they're just things that people talk about in the ether. You have to enjoy what you're doing. You have to have a passion for something to keep going back for more, don't you? So when you were really young and enjoying lots of different sports and obviously had a talent for them, what was it that made you keep going back for more?
I think you're right. It has to be that enjoyment level, doesn't it? I think when you're that age and you come into sport, whatever sport that might be, you have to have that level of enjoyment, that love for what you're doing, that excitement for what you do. And I think at a young age, you generally don't, like you say, you don't understand what failure really means. You understand that you want to do well and you want to be the first in a race or you want to be the first on the top of the podium, but you don't actually understand those failures that have to come with that journey. And I think that's something that perhaps it really took me a long time to really kind of understand how to treat failures. I think as an athlete, you want everything instantly. You want to be successful straight away. You want to be the best straight away. And actually that journey through, that development from a young athlete who starts a hobby through to Olympic champion is the most important part. It's how you navigate yourself through those setbacks, whether they're injuries or disappointments where you don't perform the way you wanted to perform, and it's how you frame those failures to really understand what you can take from those moments when things don't necessarily go to plan.
And who was it, or what was it then, that kind of taught you about that? Because you say it takes a while to understand what you're getting at. Were there external influences? Because I think the home life of a young sports person is so important, isn't it? That nurturing, because at the end of the experience, I know as a parent of sporty kids, I want them to be nice people who go out into the world and, are well balanced. But at the same time, there is a little bit inside a sports person that has to be a little bit ruthless, a little bit nasty sometimes. I don't mean that in general, you have to kind of have that single-mindedness. So what was going on around you at that point that was helping you understand what failure meant?
Yeah, I think you're right. You have to, in a really honest way, you do have to be quite selfish to a certain extent, and you have to know what you want to achieve as a sports person, and you have to make those sacrifices and almost not let things get in the way. But it's the role of those people around you. So for me, my mum, my dad, my grandparents, they were those grounding people that supported me to firstly encourage me to push myself, and they had to give me a gentle nudge along the way when you go through your teenage years and all those things that happen in life growing up. But they were just that really supportive network that kind of helped me understand, you know, those small failures that I had as a young child and how to deal with them, and helped me to kind of gain that perspective on the, you know, the bigger picture of what sport could be. You know, that kind of learning of it's not all going to happen instantly, and slow down and be patient and everything. You know, you have to build on everything. It doesn't happen straight away. And for me, those people around me, my family, my team from an early age, and my coach were huge parts of why I was able to go on and be successful, but also like manage that success in a really kind of well-adjusted way.
Which is something you have always been amazing at. I mean, right, you know, Jamie said there, the poster girl of 2012. And I remember kind of being a huge fan of what you were doing in athletics, but seeing you kind of in the build up to 2012 thinking, this is enormous, you know, this is a huge thing. London 2012 is massive. And you were quite rightly the, you know, the kind of face of so many different things going on. And that in itself, to manage that, is something that really does catch people out in sport at times, you know, because it's almost that expression, is it, the main thing is the main thing, and it's getting that balance. And it's only, I see it now with, you know, 25 years of being in this business, the ones who come through successfully have got a great team around them that let them get on with the main thing, basically. You don't get carried away with the attention and, you know, all that other stuff that goes on around, which is fun, right? It's good fun, but
yeah,
not the main thing.
It's often really hard, because as an athlete as well, you go through this journey of being successful and achieving a certain level. Then almost in most sports, it's kind of like an overnight thing where you either make a major championships and win a surprise medal, or you make a team and perform out of your skin and no one expects. And it's this moment where life just changes so much, and it's, have you got the tools and the people around you and that network to support you for that massive leap that you're about to take? And, you know, it can be really overwhelming, because it's not just your sporting setup, it's the commercial world around you, and sponsors and everybody watching you, and they all want a piece of you in a different way that you've not anticipated before. And it is, yeah, it's something that takes a bit of time to adjust to. But again, you're absolutely right. You need those great people around you, and they are often hard to find. So I 100% agree. Those key team players are the people that make the biggest difference.
What you said there as well, because most people, me included, who are listening to you aren't going to be Olympic champions, aren't going to be, you know, world medalists, but in normal life, whatever job, whatever role you play in life, wherever you're aiming towards and what your ambition is, there will be a moment where all the things you're working towards kind of come to fruition, and it's being ready, isn't it, in that moment. I've always kind of been aware of that myself, that if an opportunity comes, you don't want to not say yes because you don't feel that you're ready for it. You want to say yes because you're ready for it, and you've done that work. But it is going through all that work, isn't it, sometimes, that there are the mornings, I'm sure, where your alarm went off and you didn't feel like doing a bounding session or another 200-meter sprint session or whatever it was. And it's getting through those days, isn't it? And there's resilience. That's all about resilience.
And that's something that, like you say, you can take into every, you know, walk of life, whatever career you have or business you're involved in, or what you're doing in your career. You know, you're always going to have those moments where you perhaps doubt yourself, or you don't feel like you're at your best. But it's about knowing that you have to put in that time, you have to put in that dedication, that work to achieve your end goal, don't you? You have to be able to make some sacrifices. And I think it's that understanding and knowing that it's not going to be a smooth journey with anything you do. Like anything great or anything really successful that you want to achieve in life, very rarely you go like straight like this to it. And it's simple.
I don't think it's enjoyable, is it? I when I was a student, I did law at university, and I worked on local radio. And the first year, probably the first 6 months, I didn't get paid because I was doing experience in a commercial radio station. driving from Durham to Newcastle, doing really unsociable shifts, kind of getting up at 4:30, doing the news shift that would take me to 12 on a Saturday and Sunday. And I just loved it because I was getting this experience, and I wasn't earning anything at the start. It was about experience. And I think at the time, yeah, it would have been nice to have had a lie-in on a Saturday and Sunday, but I actually felt really grateful that I was given the opportunity. And I think then when I did start getting paid for doing it, I felt like I earned it then. I'd done a bit of training and I'd kind of earned that. And I wasn't getting paid, brilliantly. I was a student, but it was still a really big moment because actually I'd done all the graft to get to that point. And I think generally in life, for me, that is a kind of truism. I want to feel like I've earned that position, or I've earned that opportunity. And also now I've kind of turned around, and in my world of work, I want other people to have those opportunities as well. Because I, like you, certainly had people who mentored and looked out for me and made sure that what we just talked about then was dangerously close to talk about imposter syndrome, actually, and making sure that you didn't feel like you were an imposter in somebody else's world. Do athletes suffer from imposter syndrome at all?
It's a good question. I think that it's elements of doubt, isn't it? And I think everybody feels that at some stage in their career. And I think a lot of athletes experience it at the start of their career. And then almost through that level of training and the sacrifice of the time that you spend doing your skill, that kind of level of doubt starts to squash down a little bit, because you're working so hard and you're really honing in on that skill. But I mean, it might vary amongst events. I don't think any of the sprinters have imposter syndrome.
When you were first starting out, because the reason why I was kind of asked it so quizzically was because actually it's so real sport, isn't it? You can't win unless you are the best and you've done the most work or the most talent. So at the very beginning, were there times where you turn up when you were very young at a big championship and go, oh my God, these are the women that I've really admired and looked up to? And how did you behave when you were around them?
Yeah, I definitely felt that coming into the heptathlon as well. I was, I still am small, but I was really small then and really skinny and dinky. And the heptathletes internationally were huge. They were such strong, like Amazonian women. And I, often stepped onto the track and just kind of looked at them and thought, oh my gosh, like, do I deserve to be here? Am I good enough to compete with them? And it goes back to the support network. My mum would always say to me, don't let the big girls push you around, go out there and like own it. And that confidence stuck with me throughout the whole of my career, and it kind of made me feel even more confident going out there as a small athlete, knowing that actually I've trained so hard and I am strong in the gym and I'm fast. I'm actually gonna show you. You might look at me and think I'm not gonna give you a run for your money or be competitive, but actually I am going to be super competitive. And I think that kind of stuck with me all the way through my career. So, you step out on the track and you have to be confident, because just the way you hold yourself, and whether that's on the track or in your job or, whatever career you have, the way you hold yourself, the way you speak, if you speak with confidence, then, it puts you in a completely different remit. So that's something that I definitely took throughout the whole of my career and take into retirement as well.
There is something of the theatre, I think, in the heptathlon as well, isn't there? Like, you're stepping out into that arena for 2 days and you can see, it's the body language, whether somebody looks really relaxed, whether they look like they're really focused, because you're seeing them a lot more than you see any other athlete. You don't, apart from perhaps watching a 10K race on the track, but that's just very much the same kind of face that's going on, a fatigued one. But with the heptathlon, you see people in their down moments, and when I say down, I don't mean food-wise, but just in those moments in between events. And I think it's why it's so compelling, actually. And you really get to know the characters involved, which is why I think people probably were able to fall in love with you so quickly, because they were able to see you as a person as well as an athlete. And that's something we forget, I think, quite often in sport. And I try hard not to fall into that trap when I'm broadcasting, that these are all real people. We saw last night Harry Maguire getting abuse from the England fans, and I think when people forget that, sometimes detach sports people from their real world, they've all got families, they've all got relationships and people who care about them. So I think that is something that I'm always mindful of, actually, that you can critique somebody but don't get too personal about the situation. How did you take critique when it kind of first came, and you obviously you're very good at being coached, but are there certain people that, no, I'm not going to take that from you?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard. And like you say, there is a massive disconnect. You get to the Olympics and we see all these incredible performances, but we rarely hear like the full journey of what it's taken for each individual athlete to get to that point. And when you hear their backstory and, you know, their families and different situations they've been in, it makes you view their performance in a completely different way. And I think for myself, I've had, you know, lots of people critique me over my years. You know, you're not big enough to be a successful high jumper, you're not strong enough to throw the shot put the distance that you need to within the heptathlon, and question whether I was, you know, the right frame to be a heptathlete. And it's hard at the time. You feel frustrated and you think, you know, what gives you the right to say, you know, how I should, you know, look and how I should be as an athlete. But actually it gives you that kind of motivation and that fuel to say, I'm going to go out there and show you different. And I think that's what so many sports people do. And I think that is a massive advantage as well.
And that's why I think you guys are so enjoyable to work with, actually, when, you know, as a broadcaster, when I work with ex-sports people, because you're so used to being coached that when when new sports people come along who want to work in telly and you're giving them advice or you're asking, you know, something of them, they take that so well because they understand about performance. And I think whatever, you know, walk of life, I always try to say to my teenagers, you know, it's not that somebody is wanting to kind of, you know, criticize you to make you feel bad about yourself. They're trying to help you get better at something. And I think that is, as a ex-sports person, and seeing, you know, the people that I work with at the BBC, I think it's such a lovely, you know, kind of, for me, it's such a lovely position to be in, because it's lovely when people take advice on board. I mean, you're probably not even aware of it because you're just all sports people together. But I think, especially when you're alongside Denise and Michael, you know, it's such a refreshing experience.
Well, it's just an incredible environment to be in, to be honest. And I think if there's ever a feeling of imposter syndrome, it's probably there. I remember like retiring and thinking, oh my gosh, like, you know, am I qualified? Like, should I be sat amongst these amazing people and yourself and, you know, delivering sport to the world? And you feel that element of, oh, should I be here? Because I'm normally out there competing. And actually, like you say, working with yourself and Denise and Michael, such incredible like talents within what they did on the track and what you do now. But we all kind of feed off each other. And like you say, you know, pick up those elements of advice. And, you know, you see Michael there, like taking all his notes and studying every athlete to like their inch degree. It's really inspiring. And I think working with people in new environments and challenging yourself in different ways is yeah, it just keeps you going. It keeps that level of excitement.
That's a really important point, actually, because when you goal set like you had to do in you know, a sporting environment, and you had the medals you wanted to win, the championships you wanted to win, when it all finishes, and I don't want to get to the end yet because I want to talk about motherhood and being an athlete, but then you have to reset yourself, don't you? And because you can't, I'm sure you enjoyed a while without having, you know, that formal goal setting, but you're not somebody who's just going to sit on the sofa and eat a Greggs all day. So
you didn't see me yesterday. No, I'm joking.
The odd one, but you know, how quickly were you able to reframe yourself and say, right, okay, now was it quite quick?
Yeah, I think I remember, you know, initially when I announced that I was retiring, it was that feeling of relief, and I was actually in that like state of my life where I was really happy to say, okay, this is the end of my sporting career. I don't have to train every day. I don't have to, you know, think about competitions and, you know, what's the rest of the world doing. I had none of that pressure anymore. And I did have a good few months just kind of, you know, relaxing and not having any deadlines or any expectation. But then, like you say, very quickly it starts creeping in, like, what's my next goal and what am I planning everything towards? And I'm a very structured and organized person anyway. So I did feel an element of, okay, what's next and what am I doing and what's keeping me motivated?
A bit of that. Who am I? Who am I now? You know, what's my...
Yeah, it definitely felt like that, because when you're in sport, your whole life is, you know, is around sport. It's how you're eating, what you do at weekends, how you socialize, you know, just every element of who you are. And then that just all stopped. And don't get me wrong, it felt amazing at first, and I was very happy to retire when I did. But then you start thinking about, well, you know, I want to go on and do something else in the second part of my life. And, you know, I want to continue, you know, being involved in sport, but what level of sport? And, yeah, you have to start reframing everything and setting yourself all these new goals. And it is, yeah, it's quite daunting at first because you're in this unknown kind of phase of your life, but then also really exciting to start like pushing yourself out of your comfort zone in a completely different way to what I'd ever done before.
And how did that prepare you, do you think? Because you know, watching you go into an arena like, you know, Super Saturday, and all those people there, the pressure, you know, what I can imagine, you know, my stomach turns thinking about the kind of nerves that I would feel. I'm sure most normal people were. You had a way of controlling that. That's quite addictive in itself, isn't it? Those feelings of you know, that heightened feeling of pressure. Did you want to kind of try and get back to that, or are you quite happy to release a bit of that? You've done that.
Quite happy to release a bit of that. Yeah, I think I still don't have that feeling of wanting to be at that level of pressure and stress, because I feel that that was like the ultimate peak, and I'd experienced that and dealt with it and was successful out the other side. So I feel like that's ticked, that's done. But I still had that kind of drive of wanting to like push myself, you know, out of my comfort zone and do something new and challenging in a different way. Because like you say, that adrenaline, that buzz of when you are nervous for something and you know, you've not done it before, and actually coming out the other side of it and, you know, gaining new skills and just feeling really positive about taking on a new challenge is huge. And you know, these are all things I've done within sport for so many years and learned so many great ways of enjoying it and dealing with them, that I kind of wanted to continue that into the next like phase of my life as well.
So when you had a kind of a period where you left after the Olympics to have a baby, start a family, and then made the decision to come back, and you competed at a world championships, that in itself must have been a different competitive experience, because suddenly you're not the same person that lined up in 2012. Because I think anybody who's had a family, a baby, will know that you come out of that experience like a different person, don't you? Because suddenly your whole world, your priorities have shifted. Were you worried at all that that would make you somehow less competitive?
I don't think I ever worried about not being competitive, because during my pregnancy and postnatally, I was still super competitive. Like in my mind, I knew what I wanted to do and I wanted to come back. And I suppose the hardest thing was dealing with that kind of that like cognitive dissonance of being this athlete before, and then like you say, this new athlete. And I'd always compare myself to physically how I was in 2012, mentally how I was, my times that I was running in training. And actually, I was completely different. I was, you know, physically different, mentally different. And, you know, as a mother for the first time, your priorities changed completely. It wasn't all about training and me being at the track all day. It was about prioritizing, you know, really quality sessions that I did on the track, but then being, you know, with Reggie as much as I possibly could. So it was a really challenging time, because I'd never felt that before. I'd never felt that kind of
Not many athletes do it,
pressure.
do they? You know, we make quite a big thing of it when there is an athlete like Joe Pavey, you know, who wins a medal after having a baby, because there's just so few. And I wonder if that's just the way it will always be, or whether there is more that can be done, or whether it is because it's physiologically very hard to do as well, that it puts so many athletes off.
Yeah, I think it varies from sport to sport, because it depends if you're in an endurance event or a speed-based event, or, you know, a contact sport. There's so many different sports out there, so it's different for every sport. And then also there's such a grey area with practitioners and coaches really understanding how the female body changes through pregnancy and postnatally, and how to, you know, to start training the body through those changes. I think it's still, there's so much to be learned, like physiologically about a woman's body within elite sport, and how we can best support athletes who want to actually, you know, blend both sides of their life, you know, their family and their career. It's one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done. And, you know, whenever I'm asked by, you know, a number of athletes who are thinking about considering, you know, starting a family before retirement, you know, I say to them, it's the best thing you can do. It's the hardest thing you're going to do, but it's so rewarding. And if you have, again, the right people around you who are going to further their knowledge and understanding how your body changes and support you, then you can go on and do incredible things.
Yeah, and you know, juggling in motherhood, I think there'll be a lot of people listening to this who, no matter what you do, it's always that first period particularly is a challenge, because you're not quite sure you know, how are you supposed to feel about, you know, I actually want to go back to work. Does that make me bad? I feel, you know, I don't want to go back to work. Does that make me bad? You know, I'm not sure how much I want to work. And everybody's so different. I think the one thing that I think I always felt was that we should just allow people to decide themselves. You know, society seems very quick to come and make a judgment about, you know, oh, you're this and you're that. And actually, we don't want to lose talent from the workplace, whatever workplace that is. And you hone all these skills for years and years and years, and then to just leave that behind, you know, because you can't quite find the right balance in your workplace seems really sad, doesn't it, to lose women who've got great experience and wisdom to share.
Yeah, but you need that element of flexibility, and like you say, every woman's so different, and you go through your pregnancy differently, you come out of your pregnancy differently, and there's so many different variables to add in that if we can provide as much support, then the woman that comes back after having her family and starting a family and having her children is like highly motivated and organized and structured in what she does, because she has to be, because she's now got her baby to factor into everything. So when I look at the likes of Alison Felix and other athletes out there just doing incredible things as mothers, it doesn't surprise me, because that level of motivation that they had before and the level of motivation that they have now is huge, because they're doing it for their children. So yeah, I think, yeah, whether it's in sport or in the workplace, that level of support.
Women who are working motivated and whatever, you know, period, wherever they're working and whatever period of their kind of motherhood it is. I think the other thing as well is I very early on thought, well, I'm not going to take myself away from these babies if I'm not enjoying what I'm doing and I'm not really finding it stimulating, and I want to make sure that what I'm doing is worth spending time away. And I think if you've got women in the workplace who are enjoying their jobs, they're going to be so highly motivated, because, as you say, they want to make the most of that time, don't they? They don't want to waste any time, because if being able to go to a school pickup or, you know, go see a school play or something, that those things are so important. I think that's where flexibility comes in, doesn't it? So you don't feel you're missing those beats of motherhood.
Exactly, and you had 2 babies, so I can't imagine how you like navigated your way through with twins and
I didn't know any different.
back into the workplace.
So that was my normal. So yeah, I remember one morning, and they were about 5 months old, and I had a really lovely nanny who called in sick quite a lot. And that morning she called up and said she couldn't come in, and I was due to do a photo shoot for a glossy magazine. And I just said, right, okay. The car pulled up, and I walked outside with 2 baby chairs in my arms because Kenny was away. And the driver, who picked me up quite a lot, went, "What's going on?" So I've taken the kids to work today. And so my agent had to come down, and she was like in between shots. She was like, you know, helping me feed them and everything. And it can be done, you know. It's just, I think that's the thing, when you become a mum, you start to kind of problem solve in a different way, don't you? Things that you'd have thought beforehand, well, that can't happen and this can't happen. Well, we're going to have to just work our way around that. We're going to have to think differently. We're going to have to look at problems differently, solve things in a different way, which is so really enjoyable, I think, as you get older, seeing your kind of capabilities and your coping strategies change.
Yeah, you get used to, don't you, like working in a certain zone. And definitely before like the London 2012 Olympics, I was like, gosh, I'm so busy and I'm so stressed and there's so much going on. And then I actually compared the lead up to the Rio Olympics with Reggie and everything else, and I was like, wow, 2012 was like a complete breeze. Like throwing a child in there is so much harder, because you just have to change and adapt so quickly, because life throws so many different curveballs at you, and it's just, it's motivating and keeps you on your toes, definitely.
You, as I think 2012 was a turning point in so many ways for women's sport, because it was such a well-covered Olympics, and there were so many strong women who competed brilliantly in London. It felt to me like there was this realization that we didn't just have to fill the back pages with men's sport. You know, we could start to celebrate lots of women in different areas. And now there is so much more professional sport. You know, there are teams in rugby and cricket that weren't, you know, in 2012, they didn't get paid. It seems like that decade, because I can't believe it's a decade on, it has.
I know, it's insane.
I don't want to think about it being a decade, because it's still the best period of my whole life, I think, working on that. So sorry, kids. So that decade has been probably one of the most important for women's sport out of the last 100 years in terms of progress. And the reason I think that is important is not about the sport per se, but it's about showing what is possible. And that's why I love sport anyway, whether it's men or women. It's that kind of idea that you can do something that, you know, nobody's done before, or you can push yourself into a situation that you never thought possible. And that's what all these women have enabled kind of society to kind of look and think differently about what's possible.
Yeah, and like we said, you know, the Olympics is that amazing time where you actually do, you know, every 4 years hear that kind of backstory of some of those key athletes that go on to, you know, to win gold medals. And, you know, there were so many female athletes that came out of 2012 winning incredible medals, but also all having completely different journeys into the games and upbringings and backgrounds. And you know, there's different things that kids can relate to and go, oh, actually, I'm really similar to her, or I was really similar to her as a child, and look what she's doing now. And it was just that opportunity to create some incredible role models that, yeah, like having it in London gave them that opportunity to be seen for the first time.
How many, because I do women's football, and how many, not just women's football, but in other sports, when I'm reading biogs of young athletes who are, say, now 22, 23, how many of them, even though they're playing in the WSL, say, my inspiration was Jess Ennis-Hill in 2012, and they didn't go on to be heptathletes. But it's true, you know, and a few other Olympians, but your name pops up more than anybody else's. And that kind of idea that they saw you and thought, oh, hang on a minute, I'm not actually built to be a heptathlete, but I'd be an unbelievable winger, or I'd be a brilliant, you know, centre-back. And so that the fruition is coming, you know, that's the legacy, I think, the brilliant legacy from that. Changing tack slightly in terms of kind of where you are now, and also when you're a practicing athlete. I mean, I know you work out all the time and you're very, very fit, but not to the same level that you had to be. We're thinking about kind of the positive decisions that we all have to kind of, you know, incorporate into our lives and make every day, that somehow become habits, so that you don't become conscious of them anymore. Do you know what I mean? The decision to eat well and exercise, and to make kind of changes that help you incorporate those things, I think, into your life, so they're not a chore. You had so many good practices when you were an athlete. Did they just seamlessly kind of transition into normal home life with Andy and the kids?
Yeah, I think so. I think because I'd had all those habits and ways of living like my whole life, it's very hard to just suddenly stop. And I remember my coach saying, you know, you'll never run. You'll stop running once you retire. You won't run again. Because I used to moan about 800-meter sessions and some of the sessions that we did, and he was like, when you retire, you will not run again. And actually, I can't ever imagine not running. Like, I love running. I love like eating well, and yeah, I eat sugar and chocolate as well, but I enjoy that level of you know, being healthy. And I also think it's a really positive thing for the kids to see. I want them to see myself and Andy, you know, looking after ourselves and exercising and just seeing the enjoyment that we have from it, and then it just becomes like your normal life. Like, this is just norm. It's not as like working really hard to be out of our comfort zones. We're just really comfortable here and just trying to be as healthy as we can. And the biggest motivating factor is the kids, you know, for them to see that and to take those qualities into their like everyday life as they get older. So yeah, I think I've kind of gone seamlessly. I do, you know, I'm a bit of a roller coaster sometimes, and I enjoy a glass of red wine and chocolate every now and again, but I still, yeah, I enjoy those healthy habits that I've had throughout the whole of my life. It
is one of the kind of good paybacks of having a sporting life, I think, personally, is that I really enjoy exercise. So, you know, kind of find it, you know, obviously I started at a very young age, and when I first finished gymnastics, I remember going for a run one day and I was doing some sit-ups on my bedroom floor. I was about 18, and I had this eureka moment or it was the opposite, where I went, oh God, this is it for the rest of my life. Because I'm, you know, you quit gymnastics at such a young age. I was like, I haven't got any competitions. I'm just doing this because I want to do it. And a bit like you, it's like, and I'm enjoying it. Because before, obviously, I similarly would complain about training sometimes and, you know, not wanting to do particular things. But then you start to realize it is who you are, isn't it? It's kind of part of your being, because you realize that you feel so much better for doing it. And I always say, when I'm on like a World Cup or a big championship where I'm away from home for a few weeks and I've got to work really hard, long hours, I always say to my producer, as long as I've got time to exercise in a day, and as long as I can get a cup of coffee in the morning, I'll work an 18-hour day. I don't, you know, just as long as I can factor in that, that I'll be a much nicer person, to be around if I can just have a blowout of exercise. They all think I'm mad, but they go,
it's
yeah.
true though. It's that release of endorphins though, isn't it? And it's that enjoyment. It's doing exercise not to look a certain way or to do anything to reach deadlines or competitions. It's just for pure enjoyment and that feel good factor that you have after you exercise. And I think you're right. If you're, super tired, I remember when Reggie and Liv were both newborns, I was so tired, had no sleep and up at like 5 a.m, but actually forcing myself to do a little circuit felt amazing after it. It just gave me that energy to get on with the rest of the day. And yeah, that's something that I'll definitely like take into my 80s and 90s if I make it that far.
Yeah, on my Mother's Day card, amongst other sarcastic comments from my 16-year-old son, he doesn't tend to send a card, he writes an essay. He wrote, and also, he said, I admire your dedication to Pilates, which was completely sarcastic because I'm always like, I'm usually doing Pilates at like 6:30, and he's your dedication to Pilates. I was like, thanks. Not your shepherd's pie. But like you say, your positive habits are really important, aren't they? You are their best role model, especially at the age your kids are, and everything that you do they think is amazing, because you're, and savor this, by the way, Jess, because you've got a window of opportunity where everything you do is amazing, and then they become teenagers and suddenly they question the world. Want them to, but yeah, you're
I'm going to be coming to you for lots of tips on teenage kids, because you've got one of each as well, so you'll have all the answers.
Yeah, that's Denise and I. Denise has got older kids, and we do have those conversations quite a lot. And then look at you, kind of basking in the beauty of kind of toddlers and young kids. So, and obviously coming through that.
She did say to me the other day, she was like, "Oh, you've got no idea what's to come, Jess. You just enjoy it." And I'm like, "What?"
Oh, bless her. Yeah, it is that, and it's funny because when you first have babies and you're juggling motherhood with work, you think that's the hardest bit, but actually what you realize is they need you all the way. There's no kind of cut-off point where you go, oh, I can go take an 80-day round the world trip now and everything's fine. They really still need hands-on, but in a totally different, it's much more mentally challenging, I think, than those physically challenging years where you're survived. It's a it's a different thing. Before we open up to get some questions off the floor, I think we talked about resilience and determination, and your experience of seeing other great champions in other sports. Is that always, do you think, something that's just inbuilt, inherited, somehow kind of innate to people, or can people cultivate that?
It's such a good question. I think, because I did a psychology degree, and I'm always fascinated by the psychology behind everything, whether that's sports, women, men, or just day-to-day general careers. But I think you have to have some innate ability. I think that helps massively. But then you can have all the innate ability in the world, but if you're not put into the right stimulating environment, then you'd never know your potential. It would never have the opportunity to come out. So, and you do have those athletes that work incredibly hard and they're super strong, super fit, but they will never make it to World Olympic level. So I think it's always that combination, isn't it? You kind of just have to find that sweet spot where you have that ability, that skill, you're able to hone it in with a great coach and a supporting environment with your home life and everything else that comes into it. And that's why these great sportsmen and women don't come around all the time, because like your Roger Federers or your Serena Williams, these are like really amazing athletes that have just had the right stimulation at absolutely the right time and been able to go on and achieve what they've done. But it is really interesting and something that I do often think about.
Yeah, and how many people get lost along the way because, as you say, at those sweet spots, those key moments in their life, they weren't in the right environment, or something happened in their home life which took them away from the sport. And I remember it's an old book now, but Matthew Syed's first book, Bounce, which tried to put together all those factors and and come up with a formula almost. How do you create that person? But I think that's what we love about sport, that actually there's no formula, is there? It is this magical thing.
Unpredictable. Yeah.
I think resilience and determination definitely are the bedrocks, aren't they, of everybody we've just talked about, and we could add a load more great sports people's names, including your own, into the list. So shall we see what's happening in the audience and get Jamie back to tell us if we've got any questions. Hi, Jamie.
Hello. You actually took me by surprise, Gabby. I was like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to jump in now, because I was so engrossed in your conversation, and honestly, we've had so much engagement, and I just want to recap like how much you've both covered. So we kind of started with like managing pressure and the pressure of success. We then went into resilience, imposter syndrome, handling criticism. I thought it was really interesting how you're talking about how athletes adjust to different careers and the kind of work ethic around that, identity, pressure, nerves, parenting, performing at the highest level, women in professional sport, nature and nurture. And then the one that probably got the most engagement was eating Greggs on the sofa. So I think we've covered everything.
That's not
which is
true.
amazing. Yeah, it's out there now, Jess. That'll go viral, fingers crossed. But we have also had a lot of questions, which I'll get to straight away. And there's some really interesting ones. And what I've tried to do is kind of take what you've said and kind of adjust them so that we're not covering the same things. But there's one question that came in, which I thought was really personable. So thank you for sharing it firstly. And the question, I guess, Gabby, if I start with you, but Jess, please do feel free to jump in. And I know this might be a difficult question for you both to answer, because it's not one that you may be able to resonate with. But the question is, have you got any practical advice for women in their mid-30s to help them find their identity or everyday purpose when they feel like they don't want children?
So their purpose in life kind of outside of family, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've got some amazing female friends who've not gone down the road of having a family. You know, we've been friends. One of my friends I'm thinking of in particular, we met early on in our careers at Sky, and you know, for various reasons, she just, you know, that's never happened in her life, you know, and timing and all those things we just talked about obviously affect your personal life, don't they? But she's built an enormously successful business and is a really determined and very successful woman, and a good person as well, you know, and is a great kind of proxy godmother to my kids, because she wasn't actually godmother. And one day we went out for lunch and my kids went, why is Auntie, I nearly said her name then, let's call her Sue, why is Auntie Sue not our godmother? And so she kind of became a surrogate godmother at that point. And I think from watching and observing, because it's hard to talk about other people's experiences if it's not your own, obviously, but from watching her and other friends who've not had families for various reasons, I think, you know, you find the thing that you have a passion for, like we talked before, whatever that is. And it might be that you love your job but you don't live for your job, but there are other things in your life that you really are passionate about. You might really love nature, or you might want to get involved in some charitable causes or help your community. And I think something we didn't touch on, actually, which I know Jess is involved in lots of charities, and I've done, you know, for years been involved in lots of different charities and causes, the kind of joy and engagement you get out of doing something where you're helping other people and you're sharing kind of your time or your knowledge with other people to help them. I think you get so much back from that experience. So I would say getting involved in community activities or whatever it is that you kind of, you know, are really passionate about, I think is something that I think fulfills a lot of people, even if they've got family or not. You know, it's something that gives you enormous personal satisfaction. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Jess.
Yeah, I think like you say, just finding that passion and being able to almost like push yourself out of your comfort zone again, I would say, just having that ability to
uncomfortable.
To make yourself uncomfortable, to go in a different direction that you might not have, and try it and see, and you might find a new passion there and a new direction and a new purpose. So it is that kind of trial and error of being able to try new things and challenge yourself in different ways, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And I think the key thing that you both picked out is that actually there isn't one thing that defines you. And Jess, I imagine this is something that you have to deal with, that I mean, obviously your career is amazing, but everyone still talks about London 2012, but you've done loads of things and it's not just that one thing. So I think that's a great answer, is that your passion can come in so many different ways. Another question, which is related to something that you both touched on quite a bit, and the fear around the future of being a mum to teenagers, Jess, is something that resonated with you. But a few people have commented on, we've had some coaches join us, as well as people within their workplace, how they're supporting teenagers. And the question kind of is, how do you support teenagers to maintain motivation for what they're doing when there's so many different things going on? And I guess it'd be interesting to get your personal experiences as well, because Gabby, obviously, as a young athlete, you were able to maintain that focus. And was it difficult? And Jess, similarly to you, I think, I might be wrong in saying this, but your path was quite clear where you wanted to go. So if I start with you, Jess, on this one, firstly, do you have any advice for others who can support teenagers to maintain that focus and drive? And also your experience of being a teenager, were you tempted by other things?
Yeah, definitely tempted by other things. I think you're in that stage in your life where, as a teenage girl, you know, physically, hormonally, you're changing massively. You've got all these different pressures of friendship circles, and, you know, your friends are going out and doing all these different things that you're all kind of tasting for the first time. And then you've got the sport there sat in the background where you're expected to train and compete and have a level of commitment. And you know, you have to be really focused and really determined to make those big decisions and say, actually, you know, I'm not going to go out with my friends at the weekend, which seems like a really small thing for us to say now, but as a teenager, that's, you know, they're big decisions to make, to pick your sport over your friends, essentially. And I think it comes with, you know, being able, again, to put teenagers in environments, or sporting teenagers environments, where they feel that they can still have that enjoyment out of sport. I always felt that there was never an overwhelming pressure that I had to do it. Like, there was always an alternative. If I didn't want to go, then I wouldn't go. You know, my parents wouldn't drag me down to the track and make me, you know, compete and perform every weekend. They knew that they had to balance it out, because ultimately I could get to a stage and just turn around and say, well, I don't enjoy this anymore and I don't want to do it. And that's what happens with so many athletes. So I think that, you know, that balance of being able to support teenagers and just listen to them and understand the way they're changing as well.
And you did an individual sport, I did an individual sport, and I think it's maybe even harder in individual sports, because I see my son plays team sport, and I think that environment, obviously you can have your mates with you when you're on that journey together. And so, you know, you go away for a week's training camp or something like that, and you're with your mates. Whereas I think in an individual sport, even though I go away for national squad training with other gymnasts, it's just you know, who's competing, and, you know, your journey, and it's your failure and it's your success. You know, you're not sharing that with your peers. One thing that I think kept me on the straight and narrow, if you like, was my mates I was lucky that I had this great group of girlfriends who, they didn't care that I only did 1 out of every 10 social events. They still invited me every time. And I didn't realize how lucky I was, actually, until they threw a surprise party for me when I went to the Commonwealth Games. And I come home from training and I recognized my friend's Beetle on the drive. And I was like, what's she doing here? It's 8 o'clock. And they'd literally just got some cakes and stuff, and, you know, some low alcohol champagne, and did a surprise party send off. And my mum, when we were clearing up, said, you're so lucky at this age, at 16 to 17, to have friends who really, you know, support you. They're not jealous. They're not resentful that you're going to New Zealand, you know, for 3 weeks in the middle of A levels. They support you. And I think that is really important. And you can't direct your kids to have those friends, can you? But you can encourage relationships that are positive and friendships that are positive. So it's like you say, they've got to, it comes to an age where they have now got to want to do it. You know, you can't make them do it. So, but it's creating the environment where they know that they can tell you if, you know, they don't feel like going to training, and you might have a couple of words of advice that might then put them back on track and want to go training. So it's it's tricky, because they're navigating so much other stuff as teenagers, aren't they? You know, there's so many other things going on in their lives. So yeah, it's not really a big surprise, I think, that that's where sport loses a lot of kids, because they don't get those periods.
I think you both highlighted, though, the importance of having good people around you, and I've always said, like, people are everything. If you get that right, you can do anything as well. So I think that's a great answer. Another thing which is quite an emotive topic, I think, and one which is particularly relevant, is the whole imposter syndrome element. And everyone really appreciated, actually, that you're both open and honest about that you are the same as the rest of us. And I think that it's very relatable. But I also understand that hopefully I'm not wrong in saying that you're both probably quite competitive people. So when you're a competitive person, one of my favorite sayings is comparison is the thief of joy. So with that in mind, a lot of people are saying, how do you manage yourself and your focus and your motivation when you're constantly comparing to others? So Gabby, in your career, do you look at other presenters or broadcasters? Jess, did you used to look at other athletes? And And does that make you question what you do and where you're at, or were you able to focus on the process elsewhere? I'll open that. Maybe Gabby, if I go to you first, but whoever wants to jump in.
Yeah, I think when I started out in my job, I was much more insecure because I was younger and I didn't have the confidence and the ability that that I have maybe now. And I was a woman in a man's world for a long time, actually. There weren't that many women doing what I do. So when the other women started coming along, I did feel a little bit like, hang on a minute, there's only room for, oh no, there's not only room for one of us. We can all be here, it's fine. But it did take me a bit of time to get that that headspace where I didn't have to kind of, we could all share the landscape, because there'd been men dominating it for a long time. They didn't seem to think there was a problem having lots of men. So there was that kind of period in my 20s where I was a bit insecure about it. And then, setbacks. We talked about setbacks. I had a massive career setback in my early 30s. I just had my kids, and basically ITV kind of got rid of me, and I went to the BBC. But that period, that really crushed my confidence, and I had to kind of rebuild myself and start again. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. I didn't think it at the time. From a professional point of view, I got so much better at what I was doing. I'd maybe got a little bit comfortable, and maybe I'd got a little bit complacent about things. And I had to kind of just have a really good look at myself and start again and work on new relationships and start, it was almost like being at a new school, when you're 11 years old, and really have a look at kind of what I wanted to do. And if I was going to spend this time doing it, how was I going to get better? So that was definitely, if not imposter syndrome, was definitely a period of really checking kind of in and going, right, this is, this doesn't feel nice, and I don't want to feel like this again. So how am I going to move forwards?
Amazing.
Yeah, and I think within sport, definitely, like I've always kind of gone with that kind of motto of, well, my coach has always said, you can't control what everyone else is doing, you can only control what you're doing. And there is that feeling of wanting to see what times other people are running, or especially with social media now, like you see everything everybody does, and it's so hard not to compare your life or your career to other people, but actually you have no control over that. And I remember seeing a quote like years ago, and I think it was like LeBron James put it on Instagram or something. He's like, winners focus on winning and losers focus on winners. And I love that, because it's just so simple. And it is, you're not going to be successful if you're too busy worrying about what everyone else is doing around you. Just focus on what you're doing and do that to the best of your ability, and you'll be fine. And I think it's so simple to say, but actually,
because there is that, scrolling where, oh, what are they doing? Oh, that's, and everybody's lives look great on social media. And we all know that's not the reality. And there's loads of other stuff that goes on behind the scenes, the mundane stuff. And I think that's where comparison becomes quite dangerous, because it makes you feel that something's not happening for you that it should be. And that's again, talking to my kids about that is really important, that it doesn't matter that girl's doing this and she's put a photo on looking like that. It's it's fine to just really enjoy what you're doing and not compare. And hopefully, when you get to a certain age, in my late 40s, you definitely feel a lot more comfortable in my skin, than say, it's really hard, isn't it, in your 20s? Because I think even without social media, you always wonder whether you're doing the right thing. And
and you still want to be just like your friends, don't you? In your 20s or teenage years, you don't want to be any different. You want to fit in and blend in with everyone, and that's just intensified now with social media. And it is hard. It's something I definitely think about when my kids are teenagers. But it's just about supporting, isn't it, and letting them know what is reality.
Yeah. I last night I was nominated for Royal Television Society Sports Presenter of the Year, and I was at the Grosvenor House, and I knew I wouldn't win. I was up against Gary Neville and Emma Hayes, and Gary's beaten me before in this category, and he beat me last night. And so but I genuinely was but you know what? It's like I said to my husband afterwards, who bless him came along in the hope that this time I might have finally bring the RTS home. But he said, it's lovely to be nominated and to be in that, that company, but actually it doesn't change anything. Whether I brought the trophy home or not, I still do a job I love. I still work as hard as I can. I still, have great kids and a lovely husband, and all those things are so much more important, and there is a space on my shelf, don't get me wrong, but that's a very subjective thing, isn't it? And in life, I think it's very rare that you get to do what Jess did, which is where you can be the very best because you are the best, and there's no judgment on that. Do you know what I mean? And pretty much everything else in life is this subjectiveness to it, isn't there? Where people go, oh, she's better than her, or he's more successful than him. She's better at, at this, at writing, whatever it is. She's a better journalist. It's all about a subjective kind of opinion. So I think you have to find a balance in your own mind about those things.
Gabby, you may not say it, but we think you were robbed. So
yes, we do.
You are a clear winner in our eyes. I'm going to try and be cheeky and squeeze in one final question, because there's so much good stuff that you both are showing. But just in terms of kind of like, I want to relate this back to what we're trying to do as an organisation as well. So at Vitality, I think positive behaviour change is the key to our programme, and that's ultimately all that my job is ever focused on, is to try and engage people and to make them healthier and to choose positive and healthy decisions. So this is a big question, and I appreciate it's probably a terrible one that you'd never ask, Gabby, but the kind of question is, what's the one change that you feel that you've implemented into your life that you think has had the biggest impact? So that could be anything from, you know, a completely massive life-changing decision, or just a tiny daily habit that you've implemented. So I've tried to long out the question as much as possible to give you some thinking time, but now I have to choose someone to go first. And I'm going to give it to Jess, because Gabby said so.
Oh man, oh, that's so hard.
Sorry.
I suppose the thing that's had the biggest impact on my life and been healthy and organized is how structured I am, and that's something that's come through sport. So just having that kind of, you know, organization and planning and having goals and setting short-term goals and long-term goals, and that just organization around structure in my life is something that I had within sport and that I've taken through having kids and into every area of my life. And I think that has been the biggest thing that's helped me to like maintain those standards and make those like healthy choices, and those habits just become a little bit more ingrained through that structure. And I think for me personally, that's been the biggest thing that's impacted the way I make those like healthy choices and decisions.
I definitely, you know, totally agree with that. All that resonates for me, and being organized, and being organized doesn't just mean, you know, getting up at a certain time. It's, for me, have I got healthy food in the fridge because I set time aside to make sure I could go shopping rather than grabbing an unhealthy snack or a takeaway, or, you know, all those things. Have, you know, and right down to kind of wardrobe for work. You know, if I'm organized with my wardrobe, I haven't got to waste time worrying about what I'm going to wear for something. So definitely agree with that. But I think also, you know, it's all about metamorphosis in life, isn't it? And I think I did something this year, which I did this program, which is going to be on the BBC soon, called Freeze the Fear with Wim Hof. And I learned about—
I can't wait to watch that, by the way. It looks terrifying.
It was really terrifying. But what I've really taken from that is, you know, in my late 40s, there is still time to push myself into really uncomfortable positions. And I've taken away the ice showers, the cold showers, and the breathing that I learned there. And that's really helped me, I think, release a lot of, because there is an element of control when you're kind of trying to juggle all these things. And sometimes you just have to have a little bit more flow, let the water flow a bit, you know, and I think that especially has been a lesson to me with teenagers, you know, to just step back slightly and go, okay, you're gonna have to make this mistake yourself. I know. And it just came at the right time, I think, probably for everybody in this house. And I'm still having the cold showers.
Nice.
Good
okay,
work.
so freeze
good.
if you can convince, I've tried a cold shower and I do the classic, you have a hot one, then you turn it to cold, and then I basically just run out because it's far too cold. But Freeze the Fear BBC One, maybe that's the thing that will get me there. Jess, Gabby, honestly, I could spend all day talking to you both, which would be great for me, but probably not for you both. But honestly, it's been such a privilege to be able to listen to you both today. I'm sure everyone watching has been inspired. And I think also we really appreciate that this is something that you're unique that you've both shared, and you've kind of offered a more honest insight. And I think that's really generous of you, and it's something that we've all managed to relate to as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jamie, and Jess. Thank you. It's always lovely to chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabby. Thanks, Jamie.
We'll do this again soon, I promise. For everyone watching, I hope so more than anyone. Please do continue to support what we're doing as well. We hope you've enjoyed the session, and you'll get a feedback form at the end, which will pop up. So please let us know what you thought of this session as well. And we hope you'll join us again in April for more events. But in the meantime, take care and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.